Hello, my name is David Thompson, and I'll be talking to you about the concept for a joint evacuation and transport simulation system and program of record. We started with two questions. The first question was, can we be successful developing a joint JACID-validated medical simulation program of record? The second question was, what is the roadmap to success to make that happen? There are a few things that we took a look at. And first was that medical simulation is not just for training, it's uniquely suited for its actual mission execution. Unlike many other mission areas, medical simulation can be used for actual patient care, or its mission area, such as PTSD. Now, in the upper left-hand corner, what you're seeing is a picture of the old World War I 1914 barrel trainer. That was the institution of aviation simulation. And we can see the evolution of aviation simulation over the last 100 years. So 100 years ago, this was the good enough solution. 100 years later, you can see where it is. This is where medical simulation is today. We are using the barrel trainer of medical simulation today. And we need to go from a crawl to toddler today, and we need to enable medical simulation to evolve over the next 50, 75, 100 years into what it can become, and stop keeping ourselves tied to the good enough solution. The other thing we need to do is ensure that medical simulation allows for catastrophic crashes prior to the operating table. You can see on the right hand side the aviator there had a catastrophic crash. Well, in patient care we can't afford catastrophic crashes on the operating table because you can't just climb down out of the tree. Medical simulation allows catastrophic crashes time and time again, and allows the practice of what you would do in that situation. A couple of notes down at the bottom. Currently there is one program of record in all of DoD, and that's in the Army. It's the MSTC, Medical Simulation Training Center program. Now, if you look at other mission areas, there are multiple programs of record inside the services and in DoD. But there is only one program, it's in the Army, and there are 0 joint programs of record. That's bad, but it's also good because we have the potential for the very first program of record to be a joint program, as opposed to trying to pull people into joint 5 or 10 years from now, which would be extremely difficult. We can do it from the very beginning. This slide depicts the Joint Force Health Protection functional capabilities. There are 6 of them. And with all 6 capabilities, you create the continuum of care. We're particularly interested in the 4th capability, joint patient movement capability, the ability to conduct efficient joint movement of casualties or patients to appropriate levels of care. So this takes into account the entire continuum of care from Role 1 and point of injury all the way up to Role 4 and Role 5. If you'll notice, capability 3, joint casualty management, takes care of all the casualty management from Role 1 through Role 5, less en route care. So everything from point of injury through Role 5 that has to do with en route care falls into the joint patient movement capability. Within the joint patient movement capability, there are already identified gaps. In the initial capabilities document for Joint Force Health Protection, there are 4 identified gaps. We don't have to make them up. We don't have to go find another ICD. We don't have to create another ICD. These gaps are already identified. They're already validated. We simply have to act on them. The first gap is that in red, joint critical care transport capability and training platforms do not exist. Again, these words don't have to be found. They're provided to us. The next most important gap is the 4th gap, and that is that JPM training platforms and skill identification tracking systems are lacking. The ability to replicate medical processes in joint exercises are lacking, and JPM leadership development and education are inadequate. Supporting those 2 is the middle 2, or are the middle 2, and that is interoperability between C4 systems. En route care is lacking, and that means that the communications function across the services is lacking, and we have an opportunity here to provide a simulation environment which can help us simulate that communications capability and help us practice it. Instead of spending millions of dollars deploying a capability and then seeing if it works, we can have a simulation environment in which that capability can be tested before it's ever deployed. The third one, inadequate CASEVAC by non-standard platforms attended by combat lifesaver. So we don't actually have adequate combat lifesaver care en route, training for en route care by combat lifesavers. We have the ability to establish a training capability so that non-medical people can become proficient on providing en route care to the Role 1 medical treatment. My current perspective is that we have an individual device focus to our requirements. What that means is that we are buying individual mannequins, individual part task trainers, and onesies and twosies. What we need to do is move to a systems approach so that individual training devices can move in and out of a system without having to change the system. We have decentralized purchases, so we have purchases inside of hospitals and organizations and units that are not part of a cohesive purchasing strategy. We should move to a centralized purchasing strategy, and we can get a discount due to purchasing in volume. We have service-focused solutions. Rather than having a joint integrated enterprise approach, we have service approaches, and so each of our services are currently out there trying to figure out what works for them. And there's a lot of commonality among them, so if you take a joint approach, you can find those commonalities, leverage those commonalities, and then provide those things that are service unique. We have a nascent DHA process in development. We have a new Joint Program Management Office being stood up for medical simulation, and we have a relatively new Joint Program Committee. That committee does the RDT&E for medical simulation. Those two offices, in addition to the new DHA, are going to drive new processes and new ways of doing things. We can utilize that in order to help stand up this joint program. The continuum of care moves from initial entry training through advanced training, sustainment training, pre-deployment, deployment, and unfortunately some of our warfighters do become casualties, where we move from self-aid through the combat lifesaver and combat medic on the Army side, through tactical evacuation, the forward surgical team, intra-theater evacuation, the combat support hospital, Role 3, inter-theater evacuation into our Role 4 and Role 5 hospitals. Some of our warfighters then move out into the VA system, and others are able to move back into the operating force. In this continuum of care, in all of DoD, there is a single program of record, and that is the Army's Medical Simulation Training Center program. USASAM at Fort Rucker does have a simulation training capability, but it is not a program of record, it is a capability. USAF-SAM at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the University of Cincinnati has an inter-theater aeromedical evacuation training capability. It also is not a program of record. In our fixed facilities today, we have multiple capabilities. We have simulation centers. We have hospitals that have training mannequins and part task trainers. Again, those are capabilities, but they are not programs of record. Other warfighter functions have multiple programs of record, both in the services and across DoD. In the entire arena of medicine in DoD, we have one service program of record. When we look at the Joint Force Health Protection capabilities on the right-hand side, again, we're interested in the fourth capability, joint patient movement. We already have one program of record in the Army called the Medical Simulation Training Center program. With that program, we have the point of injury covered, and that aligns to the joint casualty management capability. With a joint evacuation and transport simulation program, we would have the seams in between the roll 1, roll 2, roll 3, roll 4, and roll 5 covered with a simulation program. The next step would be to cover the in-theater deployable combat hospitalization area with a simulation program of record. Again, those would align to the joint casualty management function or capability. The next step would be to cover the preventive and protective care capability with a warfighter performance enhancement simulation, which would cover the first functional capability. Next, we should take a look at definitive care, the roll 4, roll 5, in the fixed facilities. This is much more difficult and much more complex. And once we've learned our lessons and learned how to establish joint programs of record, and we've handled the theater, the tactical area, then I think we have the ability to handle and tackle the much more difficult definitive care with a program of record. The next program of record would line up with the joint medical logistics infrastructure, and that would cover the entire continuum of care from start to finish. And finally, the interagency simulation. As we look into the future, we have a need to deal with Homeland Security, the VA, Department of State, the DEA, and other organizational agencies. It would be good to have a program that allows us to practice and to be able to integrate how DoD is going to work with those other agencies. When we take a look at the continuum of care along evacuation from mission planning, mission rehearsal, point of injury, roll 1, evacuation to roll 2, evacuation air and ground to roll 3, evacuation to roll 4 and 5. What we need to be looking at is point of demand training. So the bottom line up front is start joint, save money, be integrated, be distributed, blended LVC, minimize time and space limits. If we take this and we distribute it around the world, we can break the bonds of time and space, and we can look at point of demand training, mass customization of training, delivered where, when, and how the individual, the unit, or the organization can do the training. So if an infantry, armor, or artillery unit is able to do non-standard tactical evacuation training by actually rolling vehicles and possibly utilizing tetherless mannequins, when they're done doing their part of the continuum of evacuation, we can upload the data from the mannequin, because data is just ones and zeros, into a central hub, a central repository through JKO. Then at some point later, it doesn't have to be synchronous. It can be a day later, it can be a week later. We could download that same data, the same ones and zeros, to an air evacuation unit in South Korea. If that air evacuation unit isn't able to actually get out and turn blades, they could potentially do their portion of the evacuation chain virtually on computers. It's ones and zeros. When they're done with their portion, we can upload those ones and zeros and potentially download them to a ground evac unit at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They could do their piece inside of the division rear. When they're done, upload the ones and zeros. We can download those ones and zeros to an air evac unit, aeromedical evacuation unit in Landstuhl. They can download the ones and zeros into mannequins. It's the same patient. It's in a different location halfway around the world. And then they can fly a 6-hour flight into the United States with that patient. We have the ability to deliver the training at the point at which it is needed, in the manner in which it is able to be done. If someone is able to do training in the back of a motor pool on a PDA or their own handheld device, we can deliver training to that device in the back of the motor pool. Again, deliver training where, when, and how the individual, unit, or organization is capable of doing the training. What you see on this slide is the distributed point-of-demand training concept. Training is developed in the JKO Learning Management System by the offices that the services have to develop training curriculum. The performance information is retained on a data server in JKO. Together, students, trainees access JKO through the DoD network to conduct their live training, their virtual training, constructive training, and serious gaming. The key here is that the data is all ones and zeros. Therefore, we can move information from a live training sequence from a mannequin into the DoD network through JKO to the JETS data server. Then we can move those ones and zeros back out through the DoD network into a virtual training scenario, constructive training scenario, and utilize that in a gaming scenario. If a medic is not as adept in their skills for intubation, that information can be utilized inside of a serious game, and that medic would then experience difficulty in the game intubating a patient. Down at the bottom is a video that you can access, and it will show this particular slide along with an active concept of the distributed point-of-demand training idea. System of Systems for the Joint Evacuation and Transport Simulation System, LVCG. We talk about a fidelity question, and fidelity is not really an issue of less or more fidelity. So as we talk about a system for simulation, we have to remember that fidelity is an issue of what is best for the task or the outcome that we're looking for. An example, a monster truck doing mud racing or car crushing, everybody has seen that, is an extremely complex piece of equipment. A Formula One race car for track racing is an extremely complex piece of equipment. We are not talking about less fidelity, less complexity in a monster truck than a Formula One race car has. We are talking about a different type of complexity, not less or more, just the appropriate type of complexity or fidelity. When we talk about a system of systems, we aren't talking about less or more fidelity. What we are talking about is the right tool to do the right training for the right outcome. An example would be hoist training. We have a 76 Juliet, a flight medic, and he has a helmet and he has goggles. He's holding on to a hoist. He's lowering that hoist down to a simulated casualty on the ground, a standardized patient. What if we took blended reality goggles, put them on the flight medic, put that flight medic on a full motion platform that's just big enough for him to fit onto, put a hoist out here, and then everything out and below is virtual reality. The medic is feeling the hoist. The medic is seeing what he needs to see, but the rest of it can be simulated. We can do the same thing on a PDA, on a handheld device, or in a virtual training environment. We can get at training for crews landing on naval vessels. When that medic comes off the back of an Army chopper and is looking at the casualty coming to him from the naval ship, it would be good if he was able to rehearse the type of equipment that he's going to be dealing with. In constructive training, we can look at inter-service qualifications, communication, mission planning, mission rehearsal, patient movement, management, command and control, and logistics. Hoist trainers, mock-ups, environmental training, onloading onto aircraft. In the live realm, we can look at the blended reality, the blended learning model. We're looking at immersive 4D, augmented VR, blended, distributed, integrated. Today, JETS is a system of systems. It consists of the operational system and the support system. We'll start with the support system. The support system is made up of a number of technologies. When combined, they create a component. A number of components, when combined, create a subsystem. 4 subsystems make up the support system. To highlight, a number of technologies such as dilating pupils, bleeding, breathing, make up the mannequin. The mannequin is a component. A number of components such as virtual reality patients, part task trainers, dead-weighted mannequins, bleed-breathe mannequins would make up the subsystem called virtual patient system. The virtual patient system, instruction support system, medical training command and control system, and the medical training evaluation and review system make up the support system. The operational system is made up of service-specific and service-defined and service-operated subsystems. The Army subsystem would consist of capabilities that you would find at Fort Rucker, Alabama, or Fort Sam Houston. An example of an Air Force subsystem would be the capabilities that you find at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, at the University of Cincinnati, at the CCAT training location. The Navy would have its defined and operated subsystem along with the United States Marine Corps. This all sits underneath a joint umbrella. It is a platform that is provided to the services to enable them to do the training that they are required to do. The key across the operational systems are the cross-cutting functions, such as communication, en-route care, patient movement control. We must ensure that those functionalities are able to be operated across each of the services. This will tie this into the joint space. Challenges. We have a paradigm shift that needs to happen. GHA Medical Simulation Enterprise has a one-time potential to start joint. Other warfighting functions have started inside the services, and it has been very, very difficult for them to pull the services into the joint space. We should start all of the medical simulation programs of record in the joint space and avoid that later challenge. Simulation is not just for training. Actual medical mission execution can happen with simulation, such as PTSD or holographic telemed. Telemedicine is not simulation, but the hologram absolutely is. An orange or a sack of potatoes is not good enough anymore. Just as the barrel trainer from World War I is not good anymore for aviation simulation. What we have today is not good enough for tomorrow. We need to move from the past to a future focus. Live tissue can be reduced with investment and eventually replaced, but it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of investment, and a lot of support. We need to move from purchases of individual devices toward a systems approach. Old habits are hard to break, but we need to move to best practice. Support. We need to identify champions along each phase of the requirements process. Today we have endorsements for JETS from US Transcom, US Paycom, and the J7. We need the manpower in order to move this effort forward, to help define, develop, and move it. The roadmap, time is one of our greatest resources. The iron is hot now, and we need to strike while the iron is hot. We should use the existing Joint Force Health Protection ICD and documents that are already out there. If we wanted to create a new CBA, we're looking at about 2 years. Then we would have to define and develop a new ICD, which is another 2 years. Then you devise a CDD, Capabilities Development Document, which will take you about another 2 years. On a good day, if everything goes well, you would be 6 years away from having a validated requirement. By that point in time, the iron will probably grow cold. Acquisition. We need an enterprise construct for medical simulation, and we should align that with the 6 Joint Force Health Protection functional capabilities. We need joint programs of record with a systems approach. If we do that, we only need 6 to 7 requirements documents. We don't need a separate requirements document for every training device and every training tool. We need CSL select and formally chartered project managers and program managers. We need to enable them to have lifecycle acquisition management authority. The way ahead, we need to look at a medical simulation enterprise with an integrated family of systems, which consists of 6 to 7 systems and programs of record. Systems approach to requirement versus devices. We need to enable devices, training tools to flow in and out of systems over the next 20 to 25 years without having to change the requirement every time we have a new training device. Align with the Joint Force Health Protection capabilities. We should utilize the Joint Force Health Protection ICD that's already in place and move forward from there to create programs of record. Start DHA MedSim requirements in the joint space. We can start joint today. If we wait too much longer, the services will start developing their own programs of record. Once they start doing that, dragging those programs into joint is going to be much more difficult. We need to put acquisition rigor in place as we develop requirements and programs of record. And then we need to enable the acquisition experts to run those acquisition programs according to the FAR and the DFAR. A future focus on defining capability rather than prescribing a procurement. That will open up possibility. It will open up the ability to create a future. 4 hurdles. We have recognition today that we need to develop a program of record. We know that DHA today has funding, but again, we need to strike while the iron is hot. It won't last much longer. This is the first joint program of record that we're trying to develop. This is the first requirements document we're trying to develop, so it is moving forward, but it's only one individual who needs a lot of help. Programs of record, we don't have any. This would be the first, and we need to do more and move farther. Finally, as Henry Ford said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. If I ask people today in medical simulation what they want, they will say mannequins, part task trainers, virtual reality. What they really want are integrated and cohesive systems that work together to deliver a training capability. Finally, our objective end state is bringing together our Navy, our Air Force, our Army, our Marine Corps, our DoD civilians toward the common end state of capable and successful joint patient movement. Thank you for your time. I hope this presentation has been informative.